Hello everybody, welcome back to the Blockbusters show. I'm Adam Sykes, and today we're in for a doozy, because we've talked about plenty of bad rip-off movies before on this show. I mean, earlier this month we talked about Turkish Star Wars, one of the most infamous examples of foreign rip-off exploitation, but now we're going to be looking at one of the most infamous studios to do rip-off movies in the early 2000s here in America. We're talking about the Asylum. Now, as far as I can remember, I only talked about one Asylum movie for Blockbuster show. It was Alone for Christmas, which was their dog-themed Home Alone ripoff from 2013. The Asylum has just so many bad ripoff movies, and I've considered doing reviews on them for quite a while. So just like with my 2000s movie marathon from earlier this year, I decided instead of doing individual reviews for each of them, I'll just talk about them in one big video and just get them all out of the way. The thing is, there are so many of these kind of movies that it was so tempting to just do a super mega, like almost 8-hour video on them. For the sake of brevity and my own sanity, we're going to be talking about at least 8 movies in this video, so who knows, maybe there will be another Asylum movie marathon in the future where we talk about even more movies from these people. Now, usually with these movie marathon videos, I try to go in some kind of order, whether it's release dates or in alphabetical order. This one, I didn't do that this time. I'm just going in order of which movies I watched, and to try and keep it in some kind of order, I took notes to try and keep track of which ones I watched, and just tried to make sure I had stuff written down because it's 8 movies, and I tried to watch them not back to back. I watched 4 and then another 4, but that's still a lot. So anyway, enough of that. Let's just get this over with. First up, we have King of the Lost World. Now, once you see the cover of this movie, it has a giant gorilla on it. It's pretty obvious they were trying to rip off the Peter Jackson King Kong movie from the 2000s. But, as you can tell from the title, King of the Lost World, they were also trying to make this an adaptation of the Lost World novel. This is not a very uncommon thing. I'm pretty sure they did the same with their Sherlock Holmes movie when the Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock movie came out. But this one was different because you have dragons and robot dinosaurs.
The only monsters I believe in look very much like you or I.
Robert Downey Jr. one didn't have that. So the plot to King of the Lost World involves a bunch of people crash landing on an island, and they have to try and find a way off of the island because not only is there a giant gorilla, but there's also giant spiders and dragons. It was at that point I was thinking, wait, so is the movie also trying to rip off that show Lost? Because that had people crashing a plane onto an island that had a bunch of giant monsters and shit running around, so maybe. I don't know. Maybe I'm looking too deep into that one. This also came way, way later, like long after this movie came out, but it also reminded me of this terrible shot-on-video, straight-to-video horror movie called Area 407, which was about a bunch of people that crash a plane on an island, and there's dinosaurs running around, and it was really bad. I mean, it was an almost hour-and-a-half movie, and there's like 2 shots of dinosaurs in it.
What is that?
Oh my god, these are eggs.
Alright guys, keep moving. That's really scary.
So here's the first problem with King of the Lost World. There are way too many characters. Like, there are so many characters to keep track of. I had to keep reminding myself who was who. I had to keep checking who was which character. I did find this out. Apparently, some of the characters actually do share names with characters from the original Lost World novel. So I guess that was their way of trying to connect it, to be like, yeah, see, this is an adaptation. It's not just a King Kong ripoff.
John Roxton. Ed Lamont.
It doesn't really matter because not only are the characters incredibly bland or uninteresting, but you know they're going to get picked off one by one at some point, so I got attached to nobody. Speaking of the characters, there's parts where it's like, what was the point of that? Like when our small ragtag team of heroes decide they're going to split off from the rest of the group to try and get help, some woman looks over to some guy and goes, "I can't do this, we should head back." And then they do.
Go back.
I can't take you. You gotta push forward. It's too dangerous to go back by yourself.
You'll have Lucia to help you. I gotta go back.
It's like, who were they? What was the point of that? That was the most useless 20 seconds ever. It doesn't help that the acting in this movie, like a lot of other Asylum movies, and especially ones we're going to be talking about, the acting is terrible.
Since we've gotten here, I have seen a giant spider, a man eating the vine, and we are now standing in a pit staring at something that, for lack of a better word, looks like a fucking dragon!
Pacing is also pretty bad. There's plenty of just boring spots where they just have exterior shots and showing off the island, or the jungle, or the forest that they were probably filming a lot of this crap in. Like a lot of other Asylum movies, if they're not filming in the woods and calling it a jungle, there's a part where they end up in a cave and there are giant insects walking around, and it's clearly just a soundstage that's supposed to be darkly lit. Like you'd expect, giant insects and eventually dragons that are on the island start picking off people one by one. Eventually we're down to like at least 4 or 5 characters. They end up getting taken hostage by a bunch of tribesmen that are on the island, because there's this ancient civilization, and any kind of outsiders that end up on their island, they sacrifice to these dragons so that the dragons don't attack their tribe.
Oh, Yuri. Escuelo que para cima e poem. Como descantes as máquinas.
Oh, and they also established there's a bomb on the island, because if there's not a volcano in a movie involving an island, there's got to be some kind of explosive that's going to make everything go boom. But there's a bomb on the island, and they say that it's a limited range bomb, which I think, I'm not a weapons expert or anything, but I think that means that it's not going to blow up everything on the island and the entire island just sinks into the ocean. But, it's bad news. So they're like, oh no, we got to get out of here as soon as possible. So I know what you're probably thinking. With all this going on, when does the giant gorilla show up? Like the last 10 minutes. Once our remaining characters are taken by the tribe, one of the guys in the group tries to flirt and get information out of one of the tribesmen leaders' wives, but that doesn't end up going anywhere. They're about to be sacrificed to the terribly CGI'd dragons, and then the giant gorilla shows up, takes out the dragons, and they end up escaping. But the movie ends on like a kind of bittersweet note, and I don't think they're aware of that, because it's like, they never show these people get off the island. They're just like, they got away from the dragons and the giant gorilla, but it's like, so did they get off the island?
What are we gonna do about the radio?
I don't know. I nuked the last one.
I think the giant gorilla took out all the dragons, but there's one dragon left, and it flies right towards the camera, and then it cuts to black, and then the credits roll. I was expecting this one to be a lot worse, to be honest, but maybe that was expecting too much. I mean, this is a really bad one, but considering some of the other movies that we're going to be talking about, I didn't hate this one as much as I thought I was going to. And speaking of which, that brings us to the next on the docket, The Day the Earth Stopped. It's interesting because this movie almost resulted in a lawsuit for the Asylum, because 20th Century Fox saw that title and thought it was way too similar to The Day the Earth Stood Still, and they threatened to slap them with a lawsuit for plagiarism. And I don't blame them, because this one is super blatant with what they're ripping off. I mean, yeah, it's not exactly the same. It has a lot of the typical Hallmark Sci-Fi Channel movie crap that you'd expect, like terrible CGI robots running around and destroying cities. But yeah, the plot to this one is basically just the same thing, as Day the Earth Stood Still. Some kind of messiah-like figure comes down and is trying to warn humanity to get their shit together and not be terrible to one another. The only key difference being this one has shitty acting and shittier effects.
Get out of the car! Both of you, get out of the car now! Get out now! There's aliens all over this city, and you guys are the only people in the working car. So get out, or I shoot the bitch!
On top of all that, this one just wasn't even interesting to take notes for. Like, out of all of the notes that I took for these Asylum movies, this is the one that has the least amount of notes. It's easy to see why Fox would have slapped a lawsuit on this movie, because there's so much about it where they're not even trying. Like King of the Lost World, you could at least use the excuse, oh well, it's not a King Kong ripoff, it's an adaptation of the Lost World novel. This one, on the other hand, it's super blatant what they're doing. I mean, the title is not even remotely subtle. The Day the Earth Stopped? Come on. You got a lot of the key imagery from Day the Earth Stood Still in here. The world-destroying robots in this, they're kind of like Gort. And you got the scene where some kind of official discovers the alien, and then they bring them in to question them, and they reveal that they have the ability to read minds and stuff like that.
Angelina Jolie.
She's an actress.
I was just thinking that you look like her.
What did you say?
Hey, what's going on? Is she reading my mind or something? Stop, clear my mind. Try to clear my mind.
Look, cut that out, okay?
I only have two other things written down for this movie. First of all, C. Thomas Howell not only stars in the movie, but he also directed it. And that's not the only person who you're like, wait, I vaguely remember who that is. That person at one point had a career. But they also have Judd Nelson from the Brat Pack days of, you know, the old John Hughes teen comedies from the 80s.
That's the lead, Pruitt. Don't bury the lead. The first thing out of your mouth should have been, there's a creature from another planet being debriefed in room 15A downstairs.
Next up, oh great, another one that really fucking sucks. Next up, Alien vs. Hunter. Not only were they trying to rip off Alien vs. Predator, but they were trying to rip off the vastly superior sequel, Alien vs. Predator Requiem. Really quick, before we get to Alien vs. Hunter, I've seen Alien vs. Predator Requiem several times. And does anybody else think that movie is so fucking murky and you can barely make out what the hell is happening in it? Because every time I watched it, it's so dark, and it doesn't help that the movie takes place at night, and you can barely see what is going on. So the plot to this one is some people discover an alien crash landing on Earth, and these aliens are basically the knockoff xenomorphs, and that's pretty much what we focus on for a majority of the movie, is these people trying to find out where these things are and how they could stop them. And then in the third act, they introduce these hunters. But for the most part, this has one of the key hallmarks you'd expect from a crappy Asylum movie, in that there's lots of scenes of people just hanging out in office buildings talking.
I thought she did a really good job. I know it's just the acorn, but still she,
I think she did a great job. Yeah?
So for the most part, this movie's biggest issue is that it's just kind of boring for a lot of it. Along with one of the other key staples of the Asylum, terrible CGI. Because the aliens in this, they do kind of make them look insectoid, like xenomorphs, but they make them look more like spiders. Like the big alien in the third act of the movie during the film's climax, where you have the actual alien versus hunter. They try to make it look like just kind of a giant spider. Like, it's clear that they were trying to make a xenomorph, but it doesn't look exactly like one. In a similar vein, the hunter looks just barely like a predator. I mean, like, the costume, it looks different enough, but you can clearly tell that that's what they were shooting for. For the most part, this one is just kind of boring. It starts to pick up in the third act when you actually get to the titular alien versus hunter fight. For the most part, it's just a lot of people sitting in office rooms and talking. And if it's not that, it's them running through fields or soundstage caves trying to find these things and trying to blow up these aliens. I just got to bring up that there is a twist ending to this movie where it turns out that the hunter is actually a human, and the entire time this movie actually didn't take place on Earth. You could tell whoever wrote that thought they were being so clever with that twist. Only other thing I want to point out with this movie is this is yet another one that has star power from people who just desperately needed work. You're going to notice that's a pattern with a lot of Asylum movies, and it still happens too. Like, just recently this year, they put out a terrible CGI version of The Little Mermaid to try and cash in on the Disney live-action remake of Little Mermaid. And it stars such great actors like Steve Guttenberg, also known as the poor man's Jeff Goldblum, and Dee Wallace, off of her stint of the mom from E.T. and Critters.
Now that I'm 15, I can finally go to the surface.
Maria, wait!
Something exciting is always happening up there.
Happy birthday, my boy. Someday, all this will be yours.
And speaking of terrible animated Asylum movies, there's also a ripoff of that Disney Pixar movie Onward, and of all people they could dig out, they got Tom Green to be in it.
Have you seen this work? He's my brother, but adopted.
With the magic bag, we can steal the gemstone that ended the war 1,000 years ago.
That's right, Mr. Bum Bum Song and Freddy Got Fingered himself in an Asylum movie. When worlds collide, am I right?
Would you like some sausage? Daddy, would you like some sausages? Daddy, would you like some sausage? Sausages?
Whereas the last one had C. Thomas Howell and Judd Nelson in it, this one, the big people that they could rope in are Dee Dee Pfeiffer, Michelle Pfeiffer's sister.
It's not easy. Okay, so just come back alive, okay? Harvard, don't look at those.
That was just surprising. It was like, damn, I know Dee Dee Pfeiffer didn't have like a stellar career or anything, but I didn't know that she was so desperate she had to do an Asylum movie. And like the main guy in the movie is, I forget the actor's name, but he was in that old 80s show called The Greatest American Hero.
Got donuts. Oh, I think that's against the Jogger's Bible, isn't it?
Chewy goodness.
You're an evil man.
Finally someone noticed.
Yeah, that's that guy. He's like the main character, and it was just so weird seeing him in this. It's like when you watch one of those crappy parody movies from Friedberg and Seltzer, and it's like, damn, I didn't think these people had great careers or anything, but that's who they got to be in this? Like Meet the Spartans, for instance. It's like, crap. The best that they could do was getting Carmen Electra and Kevin Sorbo. Okay, I guess they needed something to do. They haven't worked since, like, ever. But final thoughts on Alien vs. Hunter. It's mostly boring. Like, it's just one of those Asylum movies where a lot of it is just dragged out with people just sitting around talking. And then it starts to pick up a little bit when you get to the third act, when you actually have the titular Alien vs. Hunter fight. Next up on the docket is I Am Omega, their attempt at ripping off I Am Legend, and the book and the original film that followed it, The Omega Man. So right off the bat, I gotta point out, the main character in this one is played by Mark Dacascos.
But there is one more ingredient to this battle. Our secret ingredient. The theme on which our chefs will offer their succulent variations. Today's secret ingredient is...
He's the main character of this movie. He's the poor man's Will Smith that's trying to fight through this zombie outbreak. Yeah, in I Am Legend, it was like, they're like zombie vampire type creatures. Here, they're just out and out zombies. You know, they run around, they eat people's brains, they're zombies. And the actually shocking thing about this one is the first half an hour or so was actually not terrible. I mean, it's nothing great, it's clearly straight to video crap, but for an Asylum movie, the first half an hour was actually okay. Lots of scenes where they're building tension and they're trying to show that this man has nothing going on in his life now that everything is gone. He lost his wife and kid, and he blames himself, and it feels like he's just slowly going insane, trying to keep up in this post-apocalypse where zombies are running amok. And, well, one of the more interesting scenes that happens when he's not trying to kick some ass and trying to maintain sanity. I have this one written down. It was so memorable. There's a part where he goes to Vasquez Rocks and he takes a couple of drinks and then he pisses. But eventually the plot does move forward, and this is where the movie starts to get really lame, in my opinion, because, okay, he finds out that there's a young woman out there who just so happens to be played by the same actress that played his wife. I thought, that made me think like, oh, so is it that the wife isn't dead? But no, she's supposed to be a different person entirely. He tries to ignore that at first, but then when he goes out, he comes across her and comes across two other survivalists, and from there, it just becomes like Walking Dead, the sitcom.
No! You can't shoot him this close. You get blood on you.
Yeah, I know.
All right. What did I tell you?
As you'd expect, Mark Dacascos, the main character, and this woman start to bond a little bit because not only does she remind him of his wife, she's also important because apparently there's something in her DNA that can be used to create a vaccine to help stop the zombie outbreak. And so for the most part, he's trying to protect her, not just because he has feelings for her, but because he knows that she's going to be important to hopefully ending the zombie apocalypse. But as we get to the third act, things go off the rails because it turns out the survivalist guys are actually bad guys.
Oh, what are you doing?
Shut up, bitch! Get on your knees! Damn, you are stubborn, boy!
When they actually try to explain why they're trying to get rid of her, despite the fact they've been protecting her all throughout the movie up until that point, the reason that they want to do away with her is because, well, listen to this.
And if she does make it to Antioch, or they get her anywhere where they can make a cure, then we go back to the way it used to be, taking care of the sick, and the idiots and the slackers, and make this world the piss hole that it was.
So in other words, they'd rather live in a zombie apocalypse where most of the human population is dead than have a vaccine. Then Mark Dacascos shows up, he saves her, they're able to fight off the bad guys, and well, one thing they established super early on is that he rigged bombs all over the city so that he could blow it up whenever he wanted to. And once they flee the city, get away from the bad guys, he detonates it, and those assholes and the zombies go boom, and we get some obvious stock explosion effects that, well, I typically expect from Asylum movies anyway. Even though they get away, you show another zombie come out of the ground and lunge towards the camera before the credits roll. This one didn't even feel like a good cliffhanger. It's like, yeah, I kind of expected there to be more zombies because they said that it was on a global scale. So just because you blew up Los Angeles or whatever city they were from, that didn't mean that the zombie outbreak was over. Honestly, I Am Omega is one of the better Asylum movies, just based on the fact that the first 20 to 30 minutes were actually kind of good. But after that, it then quickly turns into the typical low-budget, post-apocalypse zombie movie. Even if it wasn't made by the Asylum, it still would have been nothing special. Next up is an old familiar favorite, Sunday School Musical, a ripoff of High School Musical, specifically the third one, according to Wikipedia. So all I have written down for the notes of this one is the fact that it's ripping off High School Musical 3, and below that it just says, oh God, where do I start? This is like, I don't know, the third, fourth, fifth time I've tried watching this movie, and well, I remembered enough from it so I didn't even need to jot down that many notes. But my god, this one was so dumb. Not only is this an Asylum movie, but it's also from another company that they're partnered with called Faith Films, and I actually didn't find that many movies that they put out. As for the plot, our main character is a teenager named Zach who is in a choir competition. Meanwhile, the other choir is not as good, and while it seems like this is going to be an easy win for their choir for this competition coming up, here's where the conflict starts. Zach and his family have to move because the mom lost her job and their dad is in the military and he's stationed overseas. So in the meantime, they're going to have to move downtown. So that means that Zach can't participate in the choir because he's going to have to change schools.
No, it's really not going to be that bad.
For you, maybe. I mean, what about my friends and my choir?
This isn't easy for any of us, okay?
I mean, let's just point out the painfully obvious. Sunday school is only attended on Sundays, but Zach is in this school that has the choir competitions, and clearly they have a more religious stance, so it's not really a Sunday school. It's more like a private school. Could you imagine if the religious crowd that are all into homeschooling these days, could you imagine if they tried making their own version of this called Homeschool Musical? Anyway, Zach goes to mope for a little bit on a rooftop, and here's where we get some of the weird-ass editing that's in this film. He starts to break into like a dance routine, and the music is pumping up, and it's like, oh, this is gonna lead into a song number, awesome. And then it cuts to black, and then it fades in, and he's just still sitting on the rooftop. It's like, what, no song number? The movie has musical in the title. You think they would have taken advantage of that. Eventually we do get a song on this rooftop, and it's a fucking terrible song number because one of his friends shows up. And instead of being sympathetic to him and his situation, she just starts berating him like it's his fault that he has to move.
Wait a second, boy, you're not gonna turn this around on me. When you're the one skipping town right before we finally get the chance to go to States, guess that ain't important to you.
And she's like this the entire movie, too.
While you've been busy with your new choir, Hawthorne Church is shutting down.
Are you serious?
Yeah. No church, no choir, and we can't go to States. Guess you left just in time.
It's the same school that has the rival choir from the beginning, so now his friends think that he left their choir to join theirs. And there's a girl in there who's, I think, the daughter of a pastor there or something. They establish a little bit about her, that she lost her mother, and she gets to show off how awesome her acting is.
You are angry. You are angry right now?
Dad, I'm your daughter. Stop preaching to me.
Savannah, stop it.
Dad, get out of my room.
Savannah.
Dad, get out of my room.
I know the Asylum is typically laced with bad acting, but that's quite possibly some of the worst I've ever seen from them. Also established this one character who feels like a flamboyant gay stereotype. I've seen a few people say like, oh no, he's supposed to be like a Jewish stereotype or something.
All right, so what needs to be cleaned?
You can wash the board. There's a cleaning agent and a sponge over there for you.
His performance just felt like something out of a completely different movie. And speaking of that character, him and the main girl, Savannah, they have the worst song in the entire movie. I mean, all the songs suck, but this one in particular is the worst, hands down.
I'm the preacher's little girl, and my choir's gonna sing.
If I pound the piano louder, then they'll never hear a thing. But you can't fool me,
You're not the boss.
So the more Zach's there, he starts to form a friendship with the choir, and he actually starts to help get them on track and make their singing not suck as much. And he sings this one song where they get to show off how fucking pathetic the production in these movies are. The lip syncing is terrible.
Hip hop, rock and roll, rhythm or blues, it's all the same when the band plays.
You start to throw in a little bit of conflict. You establish that Savannah has problems at home. You know, she's starting to crack under pressure and trying to meet the approval of her father. And, you know, they're both really sad that, you know, that she lost her mom and that he lost his wife. And they also established that Zach's grades are slipping, which means that him and Savannah have to spend more time together because she starts to tutor him and he starts to get his grades back up. That's the other thing about this movie. Despite the fact that it's called musical, the Asylum are apparently so cheap they didn't even bother making it a full-on musical. Like, there's a few songs in it, but it's barely a musical. And for that matter, it's barely a religious movie. So it made me think that even for the, the Christian demographic out there, I don't think they would hate it or anything because the movie doesn't really have that much to hate in it. It's not offensively bad or anything, but it just felt like, man, even for its alleged religious demographic, I don't think they'd get much out of it. Anyway, to wrap things up, the choir that Zach was with originally, their church is going to get shut down because they're low on funds. So that's why they really want to win the choir competition to get the extra money so that they can keep their church. So eventually in the third act of the movie, they decide to team up with the choir that Zach is now with, and they all agree that they're going to try and work together to get the money to help save the church. Two choirs have to come together. They're going up against some other choir for the competition, and even though they have a scene where they're reading over the rules, and it says there's nothing wrong with different choirs working together.
Is that against the rules or something?
No, Margaret read the entire rule book. It doesn't say anywhere in there that we can't.
Then they go to the judges, and the judges said that they'll be disqualified for working together.
It's been brought to my attention that this is a combination of choirs.
Yeah, the Crossroads and Hawthorne, we formed one choir.
Well, I'm sorry, I cannot allow two choirs to perform together.
What's the point of having them read the rule book just to make sure that it's not against the rules, and then a couple scenes later have it be like, oh no, it actually is against the rules. And then you get this big, grandiose song number to end things out. And even though they said they were disqualified, and the other choir ends up winning, they just decide to be extremely charitable and give them the prize money so that they can save their church.
Very grateful and honored to be receiving this award. However, we feel that we should give over the award and the title to the true winners today, the Hawthorne Crossroads Choir.
That was nice of them. Oh, and the movie ends with, man, I actually forget this part. I don't remember if Zach and Savannah, I forget if they hug or if they actually do share a kiss. As a movie itself, it's just bland. It's one of those religious movies where, I mean, yeah, there is some religious content there, and I don't think anyone's really gonna hate it for that, but it doesn't really do anything. Enough Sunday School Musical. Next up, we have Almighty Thor. Obviously, this is a ripoff of the 2011 Marvel Thor movie. And, well, you know how when that movie came out, a lot of people were saying, oh man, Thor's origin story, it's a lot like those old movies from the 80s where you have big, heroic muscle men from fantasy worlds coming to the real world, you know, kind of like the He-Man movie and Beastmaster 2 and stuff like that. It's pretty much the same deal here, except this one, as you'd expect, has an Asylum movie budget. What I mean by that is expect a lot of green screen, obvious sets,
Thor, come on.
people running around in the woods, or people running around downtown LA. The plot to this one, extremely standard. Loki has gotten loose, Loki is up to no good, Thor has to go down and stop him. And scattered in between that, you have scenes where Thor has to go to a place called the Tree of Life so that he can find inner peace or something before he has to fight Loki.
The power of my father is now in you. Use the hammer. Find it. Take this hammer, son. The power is now yours.
I thought that was kind of strange because a year after this movie came out, Terrence Malick then did one of his big artsy-fartsy 3-hour movies, and it was called Tree of Life. Every time they said Tree of Life, it just made me think of that. Going along with the budgetary limitations of this film, every time you have characters holding weapons, they either look like rocks that were connected with sticks, or Thor's hammer itself looks like a Thor's hammer prop they got at a Spirit Halloween. Here are the two things that I got such enjoyment out of. The guy playing Thor, and like pretty much every other character in the movie, but Thor specifically in this film, they give him the most overly American accent ever. Like, he sounds like a surfer dude most of the time.
I thought you said nothing to come in here uninvited.
Not on a second dig.
What?
It reminds me of whenever British actors try to imitate Americans and they just sound like they're from the 90s. They have like that, yo, come on, man, we gotta go do some skateboarding, brah. That's how Thor sounds in this movie.
Stay back behind your brother.
But Father, I can fight. I'm not afraid.
My other favorite thing about this one is they got Richard Grieco, or Greco, whichever, the other guy from 21 Jump Street who wasn't Johnny Depp. He's playing Loki, and typically with Asylum movies, you have like the regular Asylum actors who they know what they're doing. They know that they're in an Asylum movie, so they just kind of act as best as they can. And then you got the occasional people where it's like they're in an Asylum movie and they're just clearly not having fun. That's Richard Greco in this movie. He looks like he's drunk half the time because he just does not want to be there. He can't wait for them to stop filming. He wants to just get off set and then go get some more scotch.
You want to play games? I have games of my own I could play.
Come, my friends!
It's seriously bordering on Peter O'Toole in Supergirl levels of, I don't want to be here, I really want to get off set so I can go drink again.
Lindworms! Lindworms! From underneath! Come to me!
But other than that, there's not a whole lot that was memorable about this one, at least in my opinion. I didn't think there was a whole lot memorable. Even if you like watching Asylum movies to laugh at how bad they are, this one wasn't even fun. This one was just kind of boring. Like, just like with Day the Earth Stopped, I didn't really have that many notes for this, so yeah, I don't know. I'd say skip this one, even if you're an Asylum fan. Next up, we got 200 Miles Per Hour, their attempt at ripping off the Fast and the Furious movies. I'm friends with several people who are really into sports cars and racing culture and all that kind of thing. I wish I watched this movie with them because I would have loved to have seen them lose it every time they called a car by the wrong name. Because even someone like me who's not really into cars or racing culture or all that kind of stuff, even I knew that they were getting the car names wrong.
It does when I'm looking for an MX-7. What we got here is like a Honda Civic.
Fuck you, Albert. That's my dad you're talking about.
So the plot to this one is you have a young guy who lost his brother in a street race against, you know, the big, bad, hardened asshole that runs the streets, basically. His brother died, and he wants to avenge his brother, so he wants to get into racing. A lot of people in his life, his girlfriend, his mom, his friends, are telling him, don't race. Don't do it. But eventually they establish that he needs the money to pay off, I forget if it was student loans or student debt, I forget what it was. He needs to pay off some kind of college bill. So he wants to get back into racing and he wants to prove himself to avenge his brother. So he goes to this rival street gang who work on cars and they don't like him, but he says that he wants to go up against the main bad guy of the movie and they're like, you know what, we hate that guy too. The enemy of the enemy is my friend, so you know what, yeah sure, we'll help you out, pal. And they help fix up his car.
I gotta race Casey in a couple of days.
Casey? Motherfucking Casey?
Yeah. He's this asshole drug dealer from Westchester. He killed my brother.
Casey? I know that motherfucking Casey. Damn straight he's an asshole. I won't even begin to tell you what he tried to pull with us. I'd give you the Nas for free if I knew you could beat him.
I'd love to know where this movie takes place. I mean, it's more than likely LA. That's where the Asylum are stationed. That's usually where their movies take place. Usually, whenever they have to record in the streets, it's usually like downtown LA. I've had a lot of people tell me that they've been to LA and they recognize a lot of the streets that are in their movies. Apparently, this movie takes place on Skid Row because everyone seems to work really crappy, low-maintenance jobs. Because not only is this guy hurting for money to pay off some kind of college bill, but his mom works at a strip club.
Mom.
Jeez.
Ricky. Sorry.
I thought you said you were gonna take some time off.
I thought you said you were gonna quit racing.
Mom.
I also gotta point out that even though this is not some kind of fantastical science fiction effects-driven film, they still felt the need to put some more crappy CGI, because there's several times where, because they couldn't actually race the cars in the streets, they had to CGI the cars whenever they did like peel outs or whenever they did crashes or whatever, and it's very apparent. It reminded me a lot of the crappy car spin-out effects from Alone for Christmas. It's like, good to see that after all these years, Asylum still can't animate cars for shit. Big third act climax of the movie has main guy racing off against the main bad guy. They go racing, but the bad guy ends up crashing, and to show that the good guy has the moral high ground, he goes to help the guy get out of his car.
Casey! Flynn, call an ambulance. Quickly.
You asshole! You made me lose my bet.
Bet? Forget about the bet. We need to call an ambulance.
The movie ends exactly like you'd expect. The main bad guy loses the race, and the main kid wins a lot of money because people were placing bets, so he gets the money, and I guess presumably his mom doesn't have to work at the strip club anymore. I'm not gonna lie, this one was bad, but this one was kind of entertainingly bad. I mean, you're ripping off Fast and the Furious. Like, I think after the third one, people stopped taking those movies seriously, but yeah, I mean, for what it is, low-grade kind of sports action movie of racing cars, even though there's a bunch of parts where it just kind of drags. There's lots of montages and weird, stupid choices like that cop character at the end just miraculously showing up, and all the stuff at the strip club, all that was weird, but this was one of the more entertainingly bad Asylum movies, so I will give it that. And now we come to the last movie of the night, one of the Asylum's most infamous mockbusters, Transmorphers, ripping off the first Bayformers movie. Now, even though this movie does follow the Transformers format with giant robots showing up in rumbling cities,
the invaders changed the planet's atmosphere, creating an eternal night. The sun forever covered by the dark clouds.
This movie actually doesn't really feel that much like a Transformers ripoff. I mean, yeah, you know, the logo and the title, but this movie feels like it kind of takes elements from other films more than it takes elements from Transformers. If anything, the movie feels more like a garden variety Space Marine kind of movie mixed with like a post-apocalypse humans versus robots movie.
No!
You follow this ragtag team of Space Marines who are trying to fight off the robot menace. So you have elements of like Demolition Man and Terminator. Oh, and there's also a couple scenes where it feels like they're trying to rip off the Matrix as well.
Hit me!
I also find it kind of funny that this movie rips off elements from movies like Terminator, because the Asylum actually did make a knockoff Terminator movie at one point, so cleverly and subtly titled The Terminators. Apparently you can just take movie titles, put an S at the end of it, and all of a sudden it's a completely different movie. The thing that I've come to realize while watching all these movies is that the Asylum suck at characters. They really can't make interesting characters to save their lives, because there are a lot of characters that we can follow here. They give them names, they try to give them intricate personalities. It's kind of like Alien. It's like,
oh yeah, this baby's gonna do some damage.
If they do anything at all, these plasma blasters, they may bounce right off of them.
Now, gentlemen, let's try and stay positive, just because.
no one successfully taken one of these tin heads on doesn't mean that we don't have a shot at sending one of these overblown toaster ovens to the scrap heap,
But none of them were interesting. They were so bland and uninteresting. Oh, and I do gotta point this out, because I did write this down. It was same director as Almighty Thor, so it did kind of explain the very stiff direction with a lot of the acting.
You are to subdue and secure an operational Zetabot. We will need to neutralize and immobilize it so that I can extract its primary fuel cell.
There is a scene where you have a bunch of, women soldiers that are kind of hanging out at the base, and they're chatting with each other, and they're all wearing like tank tops. So that's the closest thing to sex appeal you're gonna get in this movie.
What the hell are you guys doing with our stuff?
You're not going to need it.
We're coming back.
Right. I always wanted a top bunk.
Me too. No, seriously, step away. We're aviatrices. We're supposed to stick together.
I would talk more about the plot to this one, but it was the most generic Space Marine man versus machine type movie ever. There really wasn't that much to talk about. You know, there's several scenes of people on green screen and they're shooting at giant robots, but that's about it. There really wasn't that much in between scenes of people just kind of standing around at military bases and spaceships talking.
Orders were made to be eaten before the main course. Good. Oh, and Itchy.
Yeah.
Please, get me some smokes.
I'll let you know if I find some.
Like always, the third act does kind of pick up a little bit because it looks like they're actually on a real location for once. That's not just a crappy set. It looks like they're recording in someone's backyard, I guess, or the desert, maybe. They're shooting at robots off screen in the trenches.
You need a hand, Captain.
Well, I never thought I'd be glad to see you.
Come on. They're inside. Move it out!
Who are they? Who are those characters? I don't think we've ever seen them before. Then again, I was 8 movies into an Asylum movie marathon, so for all I know, my brains were probably just getting fried. This one also has a twist. Oh my god, I think that's a good place to wrap it up. My camera's almost dead, so let's just get some final thoughts. Final thoughts, this was a terrible idea. A lot of these movie marathons are terrible ideas, having to watch way too many movies all at once, but I have to mention which I thought was the best and which I thought was the worst. Best of them, I'm looking back on these, I'd say either 200 miles per hour or I Am Omega had a decent start. It didn't carry all the way through. After the half-hour mark, it really started to suck. It really started to become your typical Asylum movie. I guess out of all of them, yeah, I'd say 200 miles per hour is probably the best one. I mean, it is bad, but it is entertainingly bad. In terms of the worst, I'd say Day the Earth Stopped, and Transmorphers I would say is a close second. I didn't really like Almighty Thor, didn't really like Alien vs. Hunter, and King of the Lost World. I didn't hate that one as much, but that one also wasn't very good either. Out of these 8 movies, yeah, Day the Earth Stopped, that's probably the worst one in my opinion, and the best, while it's not a great movie or anything, 200 miles per hour is at least an entertainingly bad movie. So anyways, guys, that does it for Blockbuster videos for November. Expect 3 Blockbuster movie reviews coming up in December. Of course, we got some Christmas movies. We got a Christmas horror movie. We got a Christmas comedy. And we have a New Year's related movie as well. So look forward to all that coming up. But until then, guys, I'm Adam Sykes of The Blockbuster Show, and we will see you guys in the next video.